It began with a scream. Not the kind kids make on a playground. Not laughter. Not excitement. This scream carried hatred. Your disabled child shouldn't be allowed in public. Every parent in the pickup lane turned. I was sitting in my truck outside Oakwood Elementary, waiting like I always did. Close enough to watch. Far enough to let Abby feel independent. That balance meant everything to her. My daughter Abby is 7. She's a purple walker because of a muscle condition that makes walking painful and slow. But if you asked her, she'd tell you she's just a little different, not broken. It had only been the two of us since her mom passed away last year. Cancer took her in 6 months. 6 months of hospitals, whispered I love yous, and pretending to be strong for a child who had already lost too much. Since then, Abby and I had been a team. And that Tuesday was supposed to be ordinary. I saw Abby coming out of the school doors, sunlight catching her hair. She was smiling, probably excited to show me some art project she'd worked on. That's when I noticed the black SUV parked illegally right in front of the entrance. Inside sat Patricia Summers, president of our neighborhood HOA. Around town, people called her Patrol Pat. She'll find people for trash cans, for grass length, for mailbox paint. She treated rules like weapons. Her SUV gleamed like it had never seen dust. Abby tried to move around it. The sidewalk space was tight. Her walker lightly tapped the bumper. It was barely a touch, but Patricia saw it. She flung her door open so hard it nearly hit Abby. "What do you think you're doing?" she screamed. Abby froze. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean to. You scratched my car." I was already stepping out of my truck. Patricia leaned down into Abby's face. "You people think you can just damage property and get away with it?" Abby's hands trembled on her walker grips. I said I'm sorry. I was halfway across the parking area when everything escalated. Patricia reached into her purse and pulled out a gun. For half a second, my brain refused to process it. Then I ran. "Put it down!" I shouted. Parents gasped. Someone screamed. Abby tried to back away, but her walker caught against the curb. She couldn't turn fast enough. Patricia waved the gun wildly. "Maybe this will teach you to respect other people's property." The gun fired. The sound cracked through the schoolyard like thunder. Abby fell. Her walker toppled beside her. I reached her in seconds, dropping to my knees. Blood was spreading across her shirt near her shoulder. "Daddy," she whispered, voice shaking. She shot me. The bullet had grazed her shoulder. Not a direct hit, but enough to tear flesh. I pressed my jacket against the wound. "Stay with me. Baby, stay with me." Behind us, Patricia stared at the gun like she didn't understand what she'd done. Then she dropped it and ran. By the time anyone reacted, she was already in her SUV, tires screeching as she sped away. "Call 911. I yelled. "Get her plate number!" The next hour felt unreal. Sirens, paramedics, flashing lights. I rode in the ambulance holding Abby's hand while she tried to stay brave. At the hospital, doctors stitched the wound. She barely cried. Even when they injected numbing medicine, she clenched her jaw and whispered, "I'm okay." "Daddy, I wasn't a police officer arrived to take my statement." "She says it was an accident," he told me carefully. My head snapped up. "An accident?" She claims she felt threatened. "She's 7 years old," I said through clenched teeth. "She uses a walker." The officer avoided eye contact. "There will be an investigation." There had been at least 20 witnesses. Security cameras, parents recording on phones. Still, something in his voice told me this wouldn't be simple. That night, Abby wouldn't sleep unless I sat beside her bed. "Is the angry lady going to come back?" She asked quietly. "No," I said instantly. "I won't let her hurt you again." But when I stepped outside onto the porch later, the weight hit me. The woman who shot my daughter wasn't just some stranger. She was powerful, connected, respected in certain circles. And the next morning, I learned she had already been released. No bail. Just paperwork. That's when I realized something important. This wasn't just going to be about justice, it was going to be a battle. And I had no intention of losing.
The morning after the shooting, I woke up on the couch. I hadn't meant to fall asleep there. I'd just been sitting upright all night, listening to the baby monitor we'd kept, listening for my daughter Abby's every breath. Every tiny sound made my heart jump. Then, at 6:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a news alert. Patricia Summers, the woman who shot my daughter, had been released. No bail, no formal charges, just pending investigation. I stared at the screen, expecting to feel rage, but what hit me was something colder. Calculation. By noon, the neighborhood chat groups were on fire. Some messages were supportive. We saw what happened. That woman is dangerous. But then the other messages started trickling in. We need to hear both sides. Property damage can escalate situations. And the one that made my blood run cold, maybe it was self-defense. Self-defense against my 7-year-old daughter, a little girl who uses a walker to get around. Around midday, my neighbor Tom knocked on my door. He got straight to the point. "She's already spinning the story," he said, his voice low. "She's telling people Abby attacked her, that she felt cornered." Cornered. I just stared at him. "She's saying your daughter rammed her car on purpose." I thought he was joking, but one look at his face told me he was dead serious. "She's got support," he added carefully. "Her husband's close to the police chief. He's been donating to city campaigns for years, hosting events for half the council." My jaw tightened. Are people actually believing her? Tom just hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. Some folks were already complaining about special needs kids sharing the regular school pickup times, he admitted. They're saying separate pickup windows might prevent incidents like this. Incidents like this. My daughter had a bullet wound, and they were talking about scheduling logistics. That evening, after Abby was finally asleep, I sat alone at the kitchen table. It had been years since I'd touched a weapon. I left the military behind. 6 years as an Army Ranger taught me discipline, not recklessness. I'm not some vigilante. I don't believe in revenge. But I do believe in preparation. Tom's words echoed in my head. Fight smart, not loud. So, instead of reacting, I started researching. You'd be surprised how much you can find in public records if you know where to look. Patricia and her husband, Robert Summers, had lived in our neighborhood for 20 years. No kids. Immaculate house. They'd run the HOA for almost a decade. And then I found it. 3 separate civil lawsuits over the past 8 years, all filed by former neighbors. The accusations were always the same: harassment, intimidation, threats. And all 3 lawsuits were mysteriously dropped right before they went to trial. The next day, the school principal called. "I want you to know," she said, her voice firm. "We've reviewed the security footage. It clearly shows Mrs. Summers drawing the firearm first." A wave of relief washed over me. "We are backing you," she continued. "Several parents are organizing to show their support." That afternoon, a small local paper ran a cautious story about the incident. It was careful with its words, avoided naming anyone or placing blame. But the online comment section told the real story. Witnesses started speaking up. Parents from the school described the screaming, the gun, the sound of the shot. Patricia's response was to call an emergency HOA meeting. I wasn't invited, but Tom went, and he recorded the whole thing on his phone. When he came back later that night, his face was tight with disbelief. "She spent 20 minutes talking about unsafe pickup conditions," he said. "She claimed mobility equipment creates congestion." I just stared at him, speechless. She blamed Abby. "Indirectly," he clarified. Then her husband Robert stood up and warned everyone about the importance of maintaining community standards, which was a threat. It meant silence. It meant control. But Patricia had made one critical mistake. She officially discussed the shooting in an HOA capacity, and that single action triggered transparency rules. As a homeowner, I now had the legal right to request all communications related to official HOA business. Emails, messages, internal discussions. 3 days later, I received the records, and my hands started to shake as I read them. There were emails going back months, complaints about that crippled girl. statements that Abby made the neighborhood look bad, even suggestions that families with special needs children lower property values. It was all there, in black and white, every word colder than the last. This wasn't just a moment of anger in a parking lot. This was months of resentment, targeting, blatant prejudice. I printed everything. I made copies of everything. Then I requested a meeting with a new detective, Sarah Moore. I'd complained about how casually the first officer had handled the case, and she'd been assigned to take over. I walk her through the entire timeline, the gun permit, the suspicious HOA finances, the hateful emails. I watched her expression change from professional interest to serious concern. "This won't be easy," she said carefully. "The Summers family has a lot of influence in this city." "I don't care how connected they are," I told her. "She shot my daughter." Detective Moore nodded slowly. "And if there's solid evidence of financial misuse and possible corruption," she said, "that broadens this case significantly." For the first time since that horrible morning, I felt a flicker of hope, a sense of momentum. But that night, Abby woke up screaming. I rushed into her room, and she was shaking, curled up in her bed. "The gun lady was in my dream," she whispered. I just held her as tight as I could. Her physical wound was healing. The stitches would come out and the scar would fade. But fear doesn't heal with stitches. As I sat there by her bed, waiting for her to fall back asleep, one thing became crystal clear. This fight wasn't just about proving Patricia Summers wrong anymore. This was about dismantling the entire system of power that allowed her to believe she could shoot a child and simply walk away. And 3 days later, Patricia Summers was arrested again. But this time, it wasn't quiet. This time, the whole world was watching. Thank you for listening to our story. If you believe that no one should be above the law, please share this video. Your voice matters.
The second arrest didn't happen quietly. It happened at 7:43 a.m. on a Thursday, the same time. Patricia used to walk her perfectly groomed golden retriever past everyone's lawns, inspecting for violations. This time, 2 police cruisers pulled up in front of her house. Neighbors watched from behind curtains. Phones recorded from across the street. Detective Sarah Moore had moved fast. The financial discrepancies, the suspicious gun permit approval, and most importantly, the HOA emails changed everything. What initially looked like a reckless accident was now being viewed as something much darker: assault with a deadly weapon, illegal firearm modification. The weapon had been altered with a hair trigger, misuse of HOA funds. Influence could bend small rules. It couldn't erase hard evidence. Robert Summers tried to protest loudly on the driveway, demanding lawyers and threatening lawsuits. But when officers placed Patricia in handcuffs, the image spread across social media within minutes. For the first time, the narrative shifted. The following days were a storm of news, updates, community debates, an uncomfortable silence from those who had defended her. But none of that mattered when I looked at Abby. She still flinched at loud noises, still hesitated before walking near the front yard, still woke up some nights whispering, "Don't let her find me." Her shoulder was healing well. The scar was thin and pale, curving just below her collarbone. The doctors said physically she would make a full recovery. Emotionally was another story. Her classmates started sending cards, crayon drawings, notes that read, "You're brave. We miss you. You're my hero." Her teacher visited with books and homework so she wouldn't default banged. Tom's wife organized a meal train so I wouldn't have to worry about cooking. And slowly, Abby began stepping outside again. 2 months later, the trial began. The courthouse was packed. Local media sat in the back rows. Residents filled benches, some in support, some out of curiosity. Patricia arrived, dressed in soft colors, hair styled neatly, expression carefully neutral. Her high-priced attorney painted her as a respected community leader who made a tragic mistake in a moment of fear. Fear. That word again. They argued that Abby's walker struck the vehicle aggressively. They implied confusion, panic. But facts are stubborn things. The security footage showed Patricia drawing the weapon first. Witnesses testified about her screaming insults. The firearm expert confirmed the trigger had been modified to fire with minimal pressure. Then came the emails. printed on large boards for the jury to read. Emails where she referred to my daughter as an eyesore, where she wrote that special needs families decreased neighborhood appeal. You could feel the courtroom shift. But the moment that nearly broke me came when Abby was called to testify. I knelt in front of her beforehand. "You don't have to be scared," I told her gently. "I am scared," she admitted. I swallowed. "That's okay. Brave doesn't mean not scared. It means telling the truth anyway." She nodded. When she took the witness stand, the courtroom seemed too big for her small frame. Her feet didn't quite touch the floor. Patricia avoided eye contact at first. But Abby looked directly at her. Her voice was soft, but steady. "I didn't mean to bump her car," Abby said. I said, "Sorry." The prosecutor asked what happened next. "She called me bad names," Abby continued. "Then she pulled out a gun and said she would teach me a lesson." The courtroom was silent. "I tried to move away," she said, her small hands gripping the edges of the chair, but my walker got stuck. I felt my chest tighten, and then it was loud, Abby whispered, and my shoulder hurt. The defense tried to suggest confusion. "Are you sure she pointed it at you?" Abby didn't hesitate. "Yes. 3 hours. That's how long the jury deliberated. When they returned, the air felt electric. Guilty on all major charges. The judge sentenced Patricia Summers to 7 years in prison. Robert sold their home within a month. They left quietly. No farewell parties. No neighborhood gatherings. Just a moving truck and closed curtains. But justice doesn't automatically erase trauma. The first day Abby returned to school, she gripped my hand tightly. "I don't want everyone staring," she whispered. "They're not staring because you're weak," I told her. "They're staring because you were strong." And she was. Her classmates clapped when she walked into the classroom. The school installed better security cameras and hired a crossing guard to monitor pickup times. The HOA board dissolved and reformed under new leadership, this time with clear anti-harassment policies. Change had come, but healing was slower. One evening, nearly a year later, Abby and I sat on our front porch swing. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink, her favorite colors. She leaned against my shoulder. "Daddy." "Yeah, sweetheart. Do bad people stay bad forever?" I thought about prison walls, about power, about arrogance. "I think some people can change," I said carefully, "but only if they really want to. What matters most is that good people stand up when someone is being hurt." She nodded. Thoughtfully, like you stood up for me. I smiled faintly. "You stood up for yourself too. You told the truth, even when it was scary." She lifted her arm, looking at the faint white scar. "My teacher says this is my superhero mark." I felt my throat tighten. "It shows I survived," she added. I wrapped my arm around her. "Yes, you did." For the first time since that terrible afternoon, I felt something that had been missing. Not anger, not fear. Hope. But even hope doesn't mean the world stops testing you. Because what none of us expected was that Patricia wasn't finished trying to hurt us, and the next move wouldn't happen in a parking lot. It would happen from behind prison walls. I thought prison would be the end of it. 7 years. Bars. Concrete. Silence. That's what I told myself the night the verdict came in. I was wrong. 3 months after sentencing, I received the first letter. No return address, just a correctional facility stamp. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "You ruined my life. This isn't over." No signature. It didn't need one. I stood at the kitchen counter staring at the words, while Abby colored at the table behind me. I folded the letter slowly and slid it into a drawer without saying anything. I wasn't going to let fear re-enter our house, but fear has a way of slipping in quietly. A week later, someone filed an anonymous complaint with Child Protective Services claiming I was mentally unstable and obsessed with weapons. Another week passed, and a rumor began circulating online that I had intimidated witnesses during the trial. None of it stuck, but none of it was random either. Detective Sarah Moore didn't look surprised when I showed her the letter and explained what had been happening. "She's angry," Moore said plainly, "and she still has loyal friends. From prison, primera, ask it. People with influence don't lose all their connections overnight. That's when we learned something disturbing. Robert hadn't cut ties with her. He'd been visiting weekly, and he'd been making calls. Lots of them. The financial investigation into the HOA funds was still ongoing, and subpoenas were beginning to stretch beyond Patricia herself. There were hints that Robert had helped move money through shell accounts, which meant prison wasn't just punishment. It was a threat to everything they'd built, and desperate people make reckless decisions. One evening, as Abby and I were walking back from Tom's house, a car slowed near the curb. Too slow. The windows were tinted. It idled for several seconds before driving off. My instincts, the ones I'd trained 4 years ago, came alive instantly. I didn't tell Abby why we went inside early. I didn't tell her why I installed new security cameras at night, or why I started checking license plates more carefully. 2 days later, Tom called. "You need to see this," he said. Someone had created a fake social media profile using Abby's photo from a school event. The account spread cruel captions, implying she had faked her injury for attention. My hands shook as I reported it. It was taken down quickly. But the message was clear. Someone wanted to intimidate us. Detective Moore traced the IP address. It didn't come from the prison. It came from Robert's office computer. That was the crack in the wall. Within 48 hours, investigators executed a search warrant. Financial records were seized, computers confiscated, and Robert Summers was brought in for questioning. He didn't last long. Evidence showed he had transferred HOA funds into personal accounts weeks before Patricia's arrest. There were also messages coordinating online harassment campaigns against witnesses, obstruction, fraud, witness intimidation. The charges stacked quickly. When Robert was arrested, it felt different than Patricia's. There was no public outrage, no dramatic defense, just quiet confirmation that corruption had run deeper than we realized. The harassment stopped almost immediately. No more fake accounts, no more anonymous complaints, no more slow-moving cars. And finally, Abby began to breathe easier. Months passed. Therapy helped. So did routine. So did laughter, returning in small pieces. One afternoon, nearly 2 years after the shooting, Abby insisted on walking without holding my hand from the school entrance to the car. It was slow, careful, but steady. Parents watched. Some smiled. Some nodded. She didn't look down. She looked forward. That night on the porch swing, she rested her head against my shoulder again. "Daddy." "Yeah. Do you think they're still mad at us?" I thought about prison walls, courtrooms, powers stripped away. "Maybe," I admitted, "but being mad doesn't make them powerful anymore." She considered that. "Are we powerful?" I smiled softly. "Not because we hurt anyone. Not because we scare people. We're powerful because we didn't stay quiet." She lifted her arm, studying the thin white scar. "My superhero mark," she said proudly. "You earned it," I replied. The neighborhood changed after everything. The HOA was restructured completely. Financial transparency rules were tightened. Anti-discrimination policies were added, not just written, but enforced. The school district implemented stricter security procedures at pickup zones. Other families with special needs children began speaking more openly about challenges they faced. What Patricia had tried to silence ended up being amplified. One evening, Abby came home with a flyer from school. It was for a student leadership club focused on kindness and inclusion. "I want to join," she said. "Why?" I asked. Gently, she grinned. "Because I know what it feels like when someone is mean for no reason." That's when I realized something. The scar on her shoulder wasn't the only mark left by that day. There was also strength, empathy, courage, far beyond her years. A year later, at a school assembly about bullying prevention, Abby stood at the microphone. Her voice wasn't shaking anymore. "Sometimes people think different means wrong," she told the room. "But different just means different." The applause that followed wasn't polite. It was powerful. As for me, I still watch the parking lot every afternoon. Not because I'm afraid, but because being present matters. Because protection isn't just about force. It's about standing beside the people you love. Consistently, the world can be cruel. Systems can fail. Power can corrupt. But when ordinary people refuse to bow to intimidation, when fathers refuse to let fear win, when little girls tell the truth, even when their voice trembles, that's when something stronger than cruelty rises. Not revenge, not anger. Justice and hope. And that's something no one, not even someone behind prison walls, can take away.